my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel, Springboard Thought. Today I'm doing a review of Chouette by Claire Oshetskyy. Hopefully that's pronounced correctly. It seems like it. This is a really interesting book. It's about a woman who believes that she is giving birth to a baby owl, and her husband pretty much invalidates that view completely. From her perspective, however, this is the chronicle essentially of her conception, her birth, and her subsequent raising of a child that is feral, different from society, and a literal baby owl essentially to her. Whereas to counterpoint this, we sometimes have an intrusion in the narrative, kind of like Lolita, where if you're reading between the lines, she is somewhat accurately chronicling what the husband's belief is, mostly in dialogue when they have conflicts and confrontations with each other. The main strength of this book, I would say, is that it is very good at not letting you side with one parent or the other. Both are very highly suspect in the way that they deal with their child. It is quite apparent that the kid has some sort of problems in the birth. They're disabled in some ways. I think a few syndromes are specifically mentioned, but I didn't catch them all. And basically, the dichotomy between the parents is the woman is embracing the feral side of her child. She thinks that society, the father, the expectations of ableism and living an able-bodied life is essentially curtailing her development, stifling her, and will result in disastrous things for her child. Whereas the father is much more of an embodiment of the patriarchy than a person, I would say. But he is very concerned with the child's safety as much as the woman, sometimes even more. The woman sometimes does things that are very questionable in service to the feral nature. And though she is unhinged, I would say, and the story is very surrealistic, almost Tim Burton-esque in horror qualities, and especially color palette and stuff was what's happening. She, in her embrace and her endeavor to love her child, she may be contributing to trauma and the harming of the child as well. Because it's an unreliable narrator, we're left guessing what's true or not. But what is definitely interesting is, again, this play where both parents are at fault at one point or another. And societal expectations are not enabling both of the parents or the kid to get help. Because as I see it, the woman is very traumatized. We go into why and where this sort of ethos or myth of the owl and giving birth to an owl came from. And it all seems to stem in like a systemic violence as coupled with her socialization from her mother. A very tumultuous relationship that ended up leaving lasting damage in the form of psychic trauma, it seems like. And from the husband's perspective, it's interesting and terrible that this sort of seems to have enabled him to actually date her and marry her in the first place. Like, she's sort of prey to him. Yet he does have their best interests at heart. He simply goes about it in a typical sort of misogynistic, patriarchal kind of way that is unintentionally damaging both of them. It's a very fascinating, quick read. The prose are great. The pacing is fantastic. It's like a fever dream. I think I read it in like one sitting. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was absolutely excellent. You know that I like unhinged women's stories already, especially when it goes feral. So I was kind of destined to like this already, but it definitely blew my expectations out of the water just because of how nuanced it was and how subjective the ending is. It gets, I would say, more or less more surrealistic towards the end. I wouldn't say it's a complete just ramp up and then it goes for it, but it is sort of a jagged line that goes up and down throughout, maybe reflecting the psychological aspects of the mother telling the story. And so you have to really grapple with your own reading to take away what this book is trying to say, I think. And the subjectivity only helps the more surrealistic components of the narrative, which I quite like. There's also a really interesting specificity used in the prose that builds like a ecosystem, which creates an interplay between societal and natural components at play. So whether or not things are described in a more naturalistic way, maybe it's leaning towards the feral components or foreshadowing those components coming, whereas societal stuff, maybe she's attempting to more conform to those things instead. It creates a lot of satisfying tension. Given how large, nuanced, and complex the themes are in this book, I think the ending really fits it because it's not something that you can kind of just tie up in a bow. These are very complex issues that society has to deal with, and the subject around mental health and the way that our society dehumanizes and makes natural things diminutive versus taking away lessons from the natural components of our lives and the nature around us that we're destroying. There's no easy answers, and so this was in its own way satisfying in its unsatisfaction. I recommend it highly, and if I haven't mentioned already, I gave it 5 stars. If you've read the book, I'd love to hear what you thought of it, and if you have other books similar to this that you think I would like, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you next video. Bye.